Welcome to the Hopevale podcast. My name is Josh Pardee, and I get the privilege of serving here as the senior pastor. And we are continuing in our series, Kingdom Manifesto, the Revolution of the Blessed. And today I am hosting, and we have a boys' takeover of the podcast. Tamara has been today she doesn't get to participate with us. So
Otherwise, engaged with other things today.
yeah, other more important things, honestly. Sure. And so you and I, this is Pastor Nate, we're going to try and bumble our way through a podcast, see if we can say anything somewhat intelligent, helpful. Yeah. I'm really banking on you for that, as it turns out. So
that's a bad bet. Speaking of bad bets,
yeah,
the Super Bowl was last night.
The Super Bowl was last night. Yeah. Did you have lots of wagers on the game last night?
I did not. I'm not a betting man. No.
Yeah, me either.
And we even had a conversation. One of my sons and I talked about that,
Really?
actually. Just the foolishness of betting. Yeah.
Betting is, I mean, it seems like it is a huge thing that is coming for specifically our young men. Mm-hmm. Of like, it gives them all the dopamine and adrenaline and all of those things. And people are finding themselves in bad situations as a result of it.
Yeah.
So it is I'm glad you're having that conversation. Like, it's a very serious matter.
Yeah. Yeah. He asked if I had put any money in the game. I said, no, I didn't. I waste money on a lot of things, but that's not one of them.
I made several jokes of that I would wager $1,500 on things, but I did not wager any money on any of it. So true confessions here.
Yeah. And it was not a great game, but
it was not a great game unless you're a football purist and you love defense, which is a great transition, Pastor Nate, to our topic of the day, as we are talking about this sermon that Jesus has been leading us through. And we discussed, I was preaching on Sunday and was talking about this idea that Jesus says, hey, blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Mm-hmm. So curious, like, what was your reaction? What were some of the things that you were thinking about as we were kind of journeying through Jesus inviting us to pause and consider this idea of being pure in heart, just kind of like one part of it, and then seeing God being the other?
Yeah. I loved it. I got excited about it during our planning meetings a few weeks ago. For those that don't know, we plan our messages out several weeks in advance, and kind of a window into what happens behind the scenes here. We have a team, multiple people who gather together, and we really look like 3 to 4 weeks out, and whoever's going to teach that message shares where they're headed, and a lot of different people speak in. So when we did this almost a month ago now, we went over it in that meeting, I got really excited because I think a lot of people struggle in their walk and their journey with Jesus with shame and guilt. And I really think it's the tool of the enemy to distract us from what God has for us. And especially, we talked, I think, on a previous week about purity culture and kind of growing up in that. And you touched on that in the message, which I thought was really good. But yeah, I think a lot of people struggle with that. So bringing clarity on that front was super healthy for our people, I think.
So let's double click on, because I did want to pick your brain of like purity culture. I mean, you've been a pastor for a long time. Mm-hmm. What was your experience, maybe personally with it, professionally? You know, what would you? I had a very short window of what I could say because it fit into a context of a message. But what other things would you be like? Yeah, I would really want to add these things and speak into that and put this on people's radar.
So there are like 5 questions in there.
Yeah, I know.
I'll take them one at a time.
Yeah, just go.
If you don't mind. My experience with purity culture was I was in the thick of it, man. When I was in junior high and high school, it was like all over the place, and that was the age of True Love Waits and some things like that, which I think you correctly stated in the message. They started in a great place. The intent behind them started in a great place, but I was a part of a generation that I think was sold on the wrong ideas around it. So maybe the intent was good, but then the focus got put on the wrong parts. So the focus was, I mean, I think the intent at the beginning was God has something for you, and if you'll pursue His path when it comes to relationships and romance, then there's something special there for you. I think that's a great message. I totally affirm that.
Sure.
But the back end of it became a lot of shame and guilt on, and if you don't,
right,
here are all the terrible things that are going to happen to you. And it created a lot of fear, and I think people making decisions out of fear. And from my own journey, it caused a lot of shame and guilt. So, and then I think like you touched very briefly on this in the message, but that purity culture movement made a lot of promises that it couldn't keep. And it laid out a path where, like, if you do these things, then marriage is going to be amazing. It's going to be super easy. Your intimacy in marriage is going to be super amazing and easy.
Right.
And obviously there's 100 different factors to go into all that. And purity before marriage is just one of 100 other things.
Right.
And so, with that, even in marriage, not only myself, but then friends that were the same age as I am and went through the same things, I think there was a tendency of like, okay, if everything's not perfect then it must be because I wasn't pure enough before, or I'm not pure enough now. And it just muddied the water. So what I loved was the way you defined pure in heart as being undivided rather than sinless, which I think is really good.
Which I didn't find that. I mean, that's
well,
that's Jesus in the scriptures and the language.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, you brought that out though. You highlighted it because I think a lot of people when they look at that, that's not what they draw out application wise. So I wanted us to spend some more time talking about that and just why that distinction matters. So talk more about that.
Yeah. Well, I think it matters because it completely changes how we hear that entire beatitude. If pure means is only, and I do want to be clear, like there is a part of this sense of like, there is this, we used to sing as kids in youth group or whatever, like refiner's fire, purify my heart. Right. And the idea of the refiner's fire is like you stick gold into a fire and it takes out all the impurities. And so that is a part of what the word means. I'm not saying that it doesn't. But if that's the only understanding, then at least in my experience, and in my personal mind, and then again, even just sitting with lots of people over the years, what seems to happen in the human psyche or how we start to live our lives is that it then becomes about, well, now my focus is on not doing all of these things and doing all of these things, right? Which then leads into the gospel of sin management that we talked about. And I think when you bring it back to starting with this idea of actually it's about being undivided and solely focused on the thing that you are pursuing and passionately, then what happens is the purifying part becomes like the byproduct of being undivided, right? So now, because I'm so focused on whatever it is, winning a gold medal, I'm so focused on God, I'm so focused on my health or whatever, like all of these other decisions start to fall into place. The quote unquote impurities are like I am in the fire and they are removed, but it's not because my focus has been on them. And so it's this idea of how what you focus on really impacts the way you're going to live your life, right? I don't know if you ever heard, Andy Stanley had this line of direction determines destination, sort of a thing. And that's kind of his way of saying that, right? Like when the thing that you are focused on is going to lead you to the destination.
I love that it's more about the direction you're oriented in than about being flawless in your execution.
I had someone yesterday in the lobby who summed up my sermon this way, which I thought was really great. They said purity is about pursuit, not about perfection. And I was like, yeah, I mean, a smarter pastor would have probably used that in his sermon, but here we are.
Yeah. And I started thinking about the ways I'm divided. And if the goal is not perfection, but it's direction, if it's about being undivided, then I started thinking through all the things that divide my attention and started thinking through, okay, well, if that's the key, then if I can even think of one thing that's dividing my attention, because there's 30 things,
Sure.
right? But if I can be intentional this week about one thing that's dividing my attention, then that gets me exponentially more focused on the one thing that matters, right? So anyway, when you think about your own journey, the people that we're walking with through life and their spiritual journey, what are some of the common distractions that people run into? What are some of the common things that are dividing people's attention and maybe distracting them from being focused on kingdom life and living in the kingdom with Jesus?
I mean, there's many. I think the common kind of refrain that I hear at the moment, and this could totally be generational, just like the people in my life, but I think it is a little bit more than that. I think there's this reality of we are so busy and overstimulated that we don't even have the capacity to focus on the things that we even want to focus on. So like by the time I get home, I've given all of my best to my work. I had to stay late. I had to, the boss wanted this or whatever it may be. And then I'm, if it just gets compounded if you have kids, like you're running them around and you're trying to get them a somewhat healthy dinner as you're getting them to sports practice or music practice or drama or whatever it is. And so there's almost this sense of like apathy or like stuckness of like, I was having this conversation with my wife a couple of years ago, maybe like a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. And I was like, as I step back and look at my calendar, like it is really difficult because it's like, even structurally to have relationships with people outside of like deep friendships, right? Because essentially all of the hours of my day are spoken for except the hours of like 9 and bedtimes. You know what I mean? And by then you're really tired, you're worn down. It's not like a, hey, now let's get together and hang, you know what I mean? Like, so now it kind of does become like a, well, I'm just going to scroll on my phone, or I am just going to go looking for bets to make, or I'm going to binge watch a show, or, you know what I mean? Like you're almost just kind of, it feels like at this moment, we're just kind of becoming numb because like it's our way to cope at that moment.
We have less and less margin.
Yeah.
And when we blink and 6 months have gone by.
Right.
And we're not failing at anything.
Right.
But we're also not intentionally being present, right?
Yeah, and we're not thriving.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's good. I started thinking through some real practical things. And especially, you talked about purity of heart not being wanting fewer bad things, but about wanting fewer things more deeply. Did I say that right? So I think it all goes together. So on the same vein, these are two super practical things that I'm going to try to do. Because even right now, we're sitting here and I got 4 different alerts on my phone.
Right.
My phone's face up. So one of the practices I want to get into is whether I'm meeting with people at work or if I'm at home or whatever, is just turning my phone over. And instead of having all those notifications coming at me, that's one thing that I want to do. And then the other practical thing that I'm going to do, I love podcasts. I love really long form podcasts. And so when I'm driving around in my car, a lot of the time, that's what I'll have on. And if I don't have that, then I'll listen to music. But the other practice that I'm going to try to get into is, instead of allowing my attention to be divided all those different directions, is giving those little pockets of time. Because for me, I'm running from meeting to meeting most days.
Sure.
So I'm probably in my car for an hour driving from place to place or more when you factor in commuting. So I'm going to try to give more and more of that time to just silence and reflection and meditation. And for me, those were 2 things in my life that was like, man, if I could give those things over, and like in that time in my car, if I can spend that time just asking God, whether it's the meeting I was just in, like, how are you at work there? How can I join you in that work? Or the meeting I'm about to walk into, how are you working in this person's life that I'm about to look in the eye? How can I join you in what you're doing there? Or if it's a situation or whatever. For me, those were 2 really easy things that I could start doing that I think will help me want fewer things more deeply.
Yeah.
Right? So, you have any other like super practical ideas like that?
Well, the one, as you were sharing that, the one I was thinking about was, so we had a staff and elder retreat a couple weeks ago, and I told you, but I'll let all the listeners in. I left my phone at the retreat, and so then I got back and had to run to a wedding, and then it was Sunday morning, and so I didn't have time to get back there. So I was without my phone for like, I don't know, 30 hours or something like that. Yeah. But it's wild how many times I bring that up because like, it's just wild how even, you bring up your phone in meetings, but I think of like in between meetings or like, again, it's just looking for that little, like, oh my gosh, there's so much to think through. This is so difficult. How are we going to handle this or whatever? I'm just going to see what's happening on Twitter, or I'm going to listen to music, or I'm going to listen to a podcast. And so like, just the drive there actually, it was fascinating because, this is so much details, but I think it leads to a good point. I went to Bay City service on Sunday morning, and then I didn't have my phone and I had to go get it. So I grabbed one of the guys there and was like, hey, I got to drive over to this camp for like the next hour and a half. You want to come with me? And he was like, sure. So then like that moment though, then was reimagined and recaptured for what, if I were going by myself, if I had my phone and I had a different reason to run back to the camp because we forgot something or whatever, I guarantee it would have been me listening to a podcast or, just kind of filling that void.
Right.
And so, I think considering even just our use as a whole with a phone or our need to be pulled into filling the silence like you're talking about is a huge problem that we have. And so like, I just kind of want to affirm everything you're bringing up of like, what would it look like if people took 5 minutes a day to just be in silence, and listen and be with God. All right. One more thing that happened on that retreat. Okay. You were there, but one of the activities we had the staff do was sit in silence for 10 minutes. And that feels like an eternity if you have not...
30 seconds is amazing. And then 31 seconds, you're like, man, got 9 more minutes of this. Yeah.
That's exactly it. But there's this sense of like, oh, I haven't just sat and been quiet and like evaluated my inner life. And so, I mean, I would, maybe to anyone who's listening around, like, what would it look like? We talk about this in Apprenticing Jesus. That's one of the things that I will do regularly is I have about 5 minutes a day where I just sit with Jesus and just in silence and try and be, it's kind of the second part of the Beatitude we're talking about, right? Of like beholding God and just being present to him. And it has been a huge game changer because there's this reality of otherwise you just move from thing to thing to thing and you're not aware, and you're at some point you even become scared of like what's inside because you don't know anymore, right?
Yeah, or you're afraid to examine, you're afraid to press deeper in, and I think, and we can I think transition to the second part of your message in a second, but the last thing that I thought about on this front was just how much energy we put into behavior management for ourselves and for other people too. So we've been talking a lot about ourselves, but I think as parents, like, if you're not careful, 99% of your energy as a parent goes into behavior management.
Yeah.
And you have specific behaviors that you want out of your kids. And I don't think it's just a parent thing. I think it applies in a workplace. It applies in friendships. There's like behaviors that we want from the people around us. And we put a lot of energy into getting that behavior. And it just made me think, and I don't have any super practical examples on this one, but it also made me think, what if I spent less time trying to manage my behavior and instead started putting more energy into like how to form my desires, because I think when we're focused on behavior management, what we really end up doing is we're training ourselves in what we love, I think, where if instead of focusing on behavior, we're focusing on the desire behind everything and forming the right desires for the right things, then we can train ourselves to love God's kingdom. We can train ourselves to love who he's made us and love who he's made others to be too. So like with our kids, instead of getting hung up on very specific behaviors and attacking those when they're not the way we want, instead it's like does my child have the desire headed in the right direction? Like, do they desire to know God more? Do they have the desire to reflect who Jesus is where they are? And I think if we spend more energy on the desire formation, then we're going to get all the behaviors that we want from ourselves and from others. But that part really stood out to me. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that front. But
Yeah, I do. I think of, especially when our kids were younger, it gets more challenging as they get older. But when they were younger, one of the things that we learned from just some kind of spiritual mentors in our life that they would, they were just 10 years ahead of us, sort of a thing, that they did with their son was they would talk about this idea of desire and frame it in kind of like a good news, bad news perspective, and also frame it in it like the bad news is the brokenness that we carry in, and the good news is like this is who God is, sort of a thing. So like, when they would mess up and they would steal a cookie from their sibling's plate or whatever, it's like, oh well, this actually shows us that we have broken desires, and that you're wanting to take more than you actually even need, because I mean, some of it you got to do it age appropriate, right? But like depending if they're old enough, you can talk about like there's a scarcity mindset versus a kingdom abundance mindset, and feeling like you're not going to have enough, and that's going to lead to greed. But then kind of also always framing it as like, but God has a pathway for you, and you can come to Him, and then trying to frame it in like, and this is who God is. He's the generous God who gave you a cookie to start with, and there'll be more cookies in the future, and again, so it's all age appropriate. But I think that gets at the idea that you're talking about with desire too. And like, there's some helpful coaching that we can do when we, step behind the behavior and are giving an imagination for looking forward of like, this is who you could be. So, and then part of that is you say it, right? Like how I'm hearing it is, there's ability to affirm even in the hard or in the falling short, right? So like there's a way to affirm your kid or son of like, yeah, I totally get why you would want to do that. That doesn't make you like this evil worm who needs to be destroyed, sort of a thing, right? And sometimes I think that that's how people have talked about or understood their relationship with God, of like that's who we are. And I'm not sure that that's the story that's revealed about who God is through the person of Jesus. I think that's the story you get if you tell the whole story starting in Genesis chapter 3. But if you start in Genesis chapter 1, where we're created as in God's image and God makes everything good and all these different things, then desires don't have to be these things that we're fearful of. It's just that we have to learn how to orient them to their appropriate place.
Wanting the right things for the right reasons.
Yeah.
So we can, I think, kind of transition into the second part of the message where you talked about, you kind of contrasted the gospel of sin management, right, with a better story that's centered on beholding God. And it made me think about a lot of different things, but it made me think about my prayer life. And so it was like, if I'm trying to figure out which gospel am I believing, is it the gospel of sin management, or is it the gospel of beholding God? And I think in my prayer life, if I'm in sin management mode, which I get into sometimes, then my prayers sound like reports, which you kind of talked about.
Yeah.
When you were talking about you and Brandy.
Yeah.
Or they sound like apologies. And I end up spending a lot of my prayer like either bringing the good things I've done to God or apologizing for the bad things I've done. And confession definitely has an important role to play in our prayer life. But if I'm not in sin management kind of mode and instead I'm beholding God, then my prayers really are more of like, what are you doing, God? And even if I don't understand something, it's taking that stuff to Him to say, hey, what are you at work doing here? I don't understand. But whether it's good stuff or bad stuff, if I'm really beholding God, then my focus is on Him and not how I'm falling short, not how I'm failing, and maybe even how He's frustrated with me or upset with me, but instead it's like looking for Him constantly and praising him for when I see him, but then also like if I can't see him in something, searching for him and talking to him about that. So anyway, talk to us more about that. Like how can we shift from that sin management mode to more of a life and a gospel that's centered on beholding God?
Yeah. As you're saying that, I was remembering, I can't remember who said it. I was trying to pull it real quick and I couldn't. But when I did the Lord's Prayer series, I think I started with a quote of someone saying, like, most of our prayer life is, help me, help me, help me. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry.
That's true. That's what sin management does to us.
Yeah, and that's a perfect segue into that idea. I think the gospel of sin management, like in my mind, giving it a name is helpful. I mean, that's the power of words and framing things, is you can then compare and contrast of what is and what isn't. And so even just that naming and framing is helpful, because I do think we all lean into it in different seasons of our lives. And I think there is beauty and just a deeper story and like something that is worth living for when you understand that that's not what Jesus is inviting you into. And so part of, I touched on it a little bit in the sermon, but that there was a part of my relationship with God and Brandy, my wife's relationship with God, where it was like, man, we're doing all the right things and we're not doing any of the bad things. And why are we so angry and frustrated and disappointed? And not that those things still don't come, but man, once we got an understanding of like how this plays out in the kingdom and that Jesus is inviting us into experiencing the kingdom here and now, and that we can actually, it goes beyond just beholding God, but that's what we were talking about on Sunday. But it impacts every area of our life, but that like we have access to God here and now, and the things that we do actually make an eternal difference, not only in the sense of like, did someone pray the prayer to follow Jesus? Obviously that does, but in how we love each other and how we care for the things that we've been entrusted with to steward, and how we are a part of the communities that we're a part of, and like the relationships, like all of those different things. That was, at least for us, and I mean, in some sense, it sounds really, I don't know if you've had this or even on this topic, where it's like, this sounds kind of simple, like, yeah, no kidding, like, how did you not see this? But like, I would say, because part of it was like, I grew up in this, at least how I would frame it now, how I heard it and understood it, was that it was like this gospel of sin management. It was kind of like, yeah, just don't do these things, do these things. And the people who do them excel, and the people who don't, we kind of look down on. And there's not really a lot of room for them unless they have this amazing transforming thing that then we can celebrate as a testimony. But other than that, like, they're kind of, there's the inners, the people on the inside and the people who are on the outside. And man, that just blew up our paradigm and sent us down this whole new path of, so what does it mean when Jesus says you can have life and life to the full? Because I don't think we're living life to the full right now. And, we're still on that journey, but I don't think life to the full means, our bank account has a ton of zeros behind it, or, that it comes with whatever status or influence, or, that you get to avoid hardship. Like, that's not it. But it is like, God's presence is here and now, and you have access to the throne room. It's back to, when Jesus dies, and after, he cries out, "It is finished." It's like the temple curtain is split. The thing that used to prevent us from having full access to God is now available to me every single day. So every single day I can sit with Jesus for 5 minutes, the God of the universe, and he actually cares. And it can reframe my understanding, my entire understanding of who I am by just that reality. So that's where I just think the gospel of sin management is, again, it has parts of it that are true. It's just a truncated gospel. It just doesn't get us there. And I think part of the reason why we get into that, which you haven't really asked, but I'll go there, of like, just as I'm thinking about this, I think part of the appeal of the gospel of sin management is, man, that's really easy to communicate in like short, pithy ways that you can push out into pop culture and don't really require a lot of like life on life discipleship and being in community and showing up even when you don't feel like it. And, like,
it leads to short-term results.
yeah.
Yeah. It leads to like the short-term behaviors that I want
Yeah.
for myself and for others, but it doesn't lead to a rich, meaningful relationship.
Yeah. And so, yeah, it leads to clicks, and it leads to, we got this many people to say yes by this prayer. And, and again, I'm not trying to put down any of those. Like, we're you and I have dedicated our lives to living for that so that people can experience that. But if that's the end game, you're going to be burned out. You're going to be frustrated, and you're going to feel like, and I think man, we've had movement in the church over the last 15 to 20 years of, there's been different phrases of people deconstructing and all these different things. And you can't make everything monolithic as far as like, well, this is the one reason. But I do think the gospel of sin management has a lot to do with what those people have experienced of they were sincere and they were zealous for their faith. And all we handed them was do good and don't do bad. And they missed out on the presence of God. They missed out on beholding God and seeing God. And so, I mean, that kind of brings us full circle. Like when you treat purity as only those things, it's going to lead to, maybe short-term results where people are feeling really good and they take off on this amazing trajectory. But what's the long-term payoff in that in 30, 40, 50 years?
Yeah. So that's all really good. I really want to go down a deep deconstruction path, but we're not going to do that right now.
Different podcasts.
Yeah.
Stay tuned. Invite your friends to the
because
podcast.
I think you're hitting on a big part of it, but I also think those that have gone down those roads, they're also struggling because they're surrounded maybe by other people who are in sin management mode.
Yep.
And so because of that, what they read in Scripture is not necessarily lining up with what they're experiencing in the local church.
Yep.
And they see two different things described. So future podcast will go further down that road. But you talked about, I wanted to highlight, because you talked about an experience between Jesus and some religious leaders in the Gospel of John, right? So you had a group of religious leaders who were trying to protect holiness and tragically missed out on God doing something incredible right in front of them. And what I thought through were two things. One is, I think that those religious leaders, we try to, sometimes we can make them into a straw man, or we make them into like characters, but I think that a lot of them were likely incredibly sincere and wanting to protect holiness because there was a whole list of other things they were wanting that they felt like holiness would provide. So I feel like they were sincerely pursuing the wrong thing, and because of that, they missed God. So it made me think through, like, again, to make it really practical, because that's where I love to live, is what are the things are we sincerely pursuing with good motives that are causing us to miss out on what God's doing right in front of us?
Like current day. Oh, geez. I think I want to touch on even, this is part of why I brought up purity culture. And I tried to frame of like, I'm not trying to just poke holes right, or any of those things. Cause that's such an easy, like, let's be a Monday morning quarterback sort of thing. But I think I would love for the body of Christ and followers of Jesus to be able to thoroughly examine the things that we do and say, not in fight or flight mode, which seems to be what is kind of happening with our systems of everything that happens online is a giant Rorschach test of like proving faithfulness and fidelity and all of these different things.
Which side are you on?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's played out day after day over and over again. And so it makes it really hard for us to even have thorough, robust conversations about a whole variety of topics that are impacting us theologically or politically or in the community. And so if I were to push us to one thing, I think like growing that muscle to not be move into fight or flight, but to like gather around a table and have conversations.
Yeah, I
and
love that.
it would radically change anything and everything. And I mean, I would want to push, like, if you're a part of Hopevale, I would want to push you a little bit of like, we can do this because we believe that Jesus is the answer. And so I can enter into conversations with people I disagree with, and I don't have to try and win. I don't have to try and convince you of anything. I can show up and, I go back to like our series on the table of like, we're just trying to discern where God's at work, and you kind of mentioned a minute ago when you step into meetings, like where's God at work in this person's life? If God is always present and he's always at work, then this whole outcome is not dependent on me. Like, that's back to gospel of sin management.
Yeah.
Like, it's not my ability. It's me showing up and bringing who I am and trying to see what the Spirit is doing at this moment and just be faithful with that moment.
Yeah, it's
don't
measuring. It's like measuring not measuring behavior. It's measuring desire. Right?
Yeah. And you don't know how that's going to impact all of human history in the future. And I think like that's kind of what we feel like. We feel like everything's so risky right now because if my party doesn't win, or if you watch this Super Bowl halftime show, or like, all of these different things. And it's like, it's this whole giant risk, and it's a winner take all sort of game. And I don't see that in scripture.
Yeah.
I don't see that in church history. I don't see that from the life of Jesus.
Yeah.
Like, Jesus is not treating any of his interactions as a zero-sum game.
Absolutely.
He just says, I'm going to be faithful to what anything you see me doing is what the Father will do, right? And so that's who I want to be. That's who I want us to be. Is it's not so much, we have so much to risk in this moment. I really have very little to risk. My identity and future are secure. It's not going anywhere. So I don't have to enter in combative with you. I don't have to try and convince you. I can try and just kind of ask you questions and prod along. Now, that doesn't mean I'm going to sign, please don't hear what I'm not saying. It doesn't mean I'm signing off on everything, or me having a conversation is affirming, the whole thought behind what people may believe. That's not how that works ever.
I love that. And sometimes we're on the same exact channel.
Yeah.
I love sometimes we're not, but a lot of the time we are. But no, I think there is a spirit of division at work in our world today. And I think there are forces that would love to divide as many people as often as possible. And so I love everything you just said. And I really think we need to examine our desires as we enter into these things. I think, first of all, we need to continue to enter in with people that we disagree with, and continue to engage, continue to open our lives and hearts to people that may believe differently than we do on a variety of things. Yeah. But when we are in those conversations, or we are connecting, I think it's really important, as we listen to what someone is saying, as we listen to what someone is sharing, that we ask ourselves, am I listening right now to win this conversation, or am I listening to behold God? Am I listening to witness what God is doing in this person's life? And if we can flip that switch, I think on the other side of that examining of our desires and our relationships, God has so much kingdom work available for us to join him in. Yeah. Where instead of focusing on, all right, I'm going to find a point I can really pick apart here.
Right.
And that could be in an argument with a spouse, not just someone you disagree with politically. It could be an argument with a spouse. It could be in a heated discussion at work about what the right thing is to do. But if we can stop listening to win and instead listen to see or notice where God is already at work, and joining him in that, and that person's life and that situation in our world right now, and the community that we live in, I think that's going to be so much more fruitful. And I think that was one of the pieces where your message, if we apply that where the rubber meets the road, it could change things in a powerful way. So
yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think, kind of part of what we talked about earlier of like the numbing ourselves and we don't really know what to do. Like, I think the divisiveness that we're naming here it comes from, we want to do something. We just aren't sure what to do or how to do it. And so, in some senses, it feels like the best thing I can do is be like a keyboard warrior on posting either my thoughts on every take or the people that I follow and their thoughts on every take. And there's a part for that conversation. I'm not trying to like say that we can't have part of those conversations. I just think the most effective thing for you to do, though, is to be a part of the local church and to show up and to actually sit with people who may or may not disagree with you. Maybe they won't. But there's this transformation that happens where part of us beholding God and seeing God is actually when you and I aren't on the same wavelength, and we have to sit down and figure it out, right? Like, and you know what I learn in those moments is like we both want the same things. Like
Yes,
we're just seeing it from different vantage points.
Yeah.
And so I tell people this regularly in our church of, listen, I'll pull the most, red leaning person we have in our church and the most blue leaning person we have in our church. And what's going to happen is we're all going to agree on like 99% of the things. We're going to agree on, we all want a better community to live in. We all want better jobs. We all want to secure housing for the next generation. We all want better healthcare. We all want better education. We all want, now how we're going to go about that is kind of like even the political nature of that. But what happens is in this space, that this moment we're living in, and it's like, we only talk about kind of like 3 topics at a time, it seems like, and they change day to day on what the topics are. But it's like, we can only highlight the things that we are maybe divisive on. And it's not that we can just allow it to be about ideas and concepts and wanting to solve and make things better. It's that you are a terrible, evil person if you don't agree with me. Because if you don't agree with me, it must be for these reasons, and I project on you all of the worst reasons. When most of the time that isn't the case. Now, there's going to be some people that we're just like, yeah, that's crazy talk. Like that's way far out of what we would say is within a traditional like kind of Christian view or ethic or whatever it may be. But I just think that most of the time that isn't the case, and we're being deceived in the divisiveness of how separated we are because we have extreme voices being lobbed at us, and we have opportunists who are trying to profit on it. And that's how you get clicks, and that's how you get more eyeballs and all those sorts of things. So that's where I just think like the kind of like the medicine that like would be helpful for us is to show up to the local church and to be regularly involved and to be serving and to be having conversations. And the reason I think that is because Jesus is the one who starts the church and says like, hey, this is how we get the thing done in the future. It's not actually through, though he's in Pilate's palace, that's not actually how he gets things done. It's like, I will build my church, and that's how the kingdom will be present and people will be able to experience it. So
That's really good.
That's what I want to dedicate my life to, and want to continue to call us to that. So
I love that.
Yeah.
Any final words you'd want to give people on Matthew 5:8?
Just that I think, man, we've been on a journey with Jesus, and I think the thing that I've been hearing after services and in the lobby and other forms of communication or whatever is like, wow, this is a lot different than I thought it was. And we've been saying it throughout the series, but Jesus is high invitation and he's high challenge, and just brace yourselves because the next couple of weeks he kind of cranks up the high challenge sort of a thing. So like it is a reframing. It's a new way of seeing the entire world. But I just believe it really is the way to the good life. And I think that that's why Jesus gives us this, is he's trying to give us a new imagination. And so, man, it's fun to be on the journey. It's fun to think through some of these things and their implications for who we are and where we're going and what Jesus has for us. So just want to say thank you so much for all of you joining us on the Hopevale podcast. Hope you have an amazing week, and we'll still be here next week. So hit the like button. I don't know. This is why I'm not supposed to do this part of the job, right?
Okay, just keep listening.
Just keep listening. All right. Love y'all. Bye.